An autistic boy points every day to the window, always repeating the same phrase. Nobody understands what he means, not even his own father. But a new employee decides to investigate and makes a shocking discovery. What she finds in the garden changes that family's destiny forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. In the Morrison family mansion, high up in the gardens in London, silence was more than just the absence of sound. It was a constant presence, an almost physical weight in the marble halls and noble wood. Bernard Morrison, owner of one of the country's largest construction companies, moved like a shadow through the spaces of his own home, always absorbed in phone calls, spreadsheets, and virtual meetings. At 45, the businessman had transformed grief into compulsive work. The office was his refuge, the only place where he could breathe without the absence of Clarice, his wife, suffocating him. On the second floor of the mansion, isolated in a room filled with untouched toys, Matthew, his 8-year-old son, maintained his own distant routine. Diagnosed with autism at 3, the boy spent hours in front of the same window overlooking the back of the property, his small finger stretched out, always pointing to the same spot between the trees of the abandoned garden. "Mommy." There again. The phrase repeated dozens of times a day, with the same intonation, the same precise gesture. The specialists hired by Bernard classified this as stereotyped behavior, another symptom to be controlled, another line in the monthly reports that accumulated unread. His father rarely visited his son's room. When he did, it was quick, clumsy, always with the look of someone seeking an exit. The routine followed with mathematical precision under the command of Mrs. Celeste, the house's governess for decades, who managed nurses, therapists, and a team of staff with the cold efficiency Bernard demanded. No one questioned, no one investigated, until Celia arrived. "Do you have a preference for the type of beans for the boys' lunch?" the new employee asked on her first day, as Bernard walked through the kitchen in search of coffee. He stopped, confused. "What do you mean, type of beans?" "Pinto black-eyed peas. Each has a different flavor, a different texture. Sometimes children are sensitive to that." Bernard adjusted his tie, uncomfortable. "Ask Mrs. Celeste. She handles those things." Celia Sanders was 52, her hands calloused from heavy work, and her gaze saw beyond surfaces. Hailing from the Highlands, she brought with her only simple clothes and a wisdom that didn't come from books or diplomas. Hired as a kitchen assistant, she soon noticed the mansion's silences, the empty spaces between people who shared the same roof. "That boy needs food that feeds the soul too," she commented to Mrs. Celeste on the third day, while chopping vegetables. The governess raised her eyebrows, surprised by the audacity. "Matthew has specialized nutritional support. We follow the menu strictly. A menu feeds the body. I'm talking about another kind of hunger." Mrs. Celeste dismissed the comment with an irritated gesture, but Celia was not intimidated. In the following days, she began to observe the boy whenever she could, during the meals she brought to his room. On the rare occasions, he went out to the garden accompanied by a therapist. On mornings when she cleaned the corridor and saw him standing, like a statue before the window. It was on a cloudy Wednesday, while everyone was busy with investors visiting, that Celia finally found herself alone with Matthew. The shift nurse had to leave for a family emergency, and Mrs. Celeste, busy with the meetings buffet, asked Celia to keep an eye on the boy, just for an hour, and don't let him get agitated. In the pastel-decorated room, Matthew maintained his usual position, feet planted on the floor, back straight, index finger extended towards the window. "Mommy, there again," he repeated without averting his gaze. Instead of ignoring or correcting him, as she had observed the others do, Celia slowly approached and knelt beside the boy. She noticed the tension in his small shoulders before the phrase, the subtle change in his voice, the precise direction of his finger that never varied. "What are you seeing there, Matthew?" she asked softly. The boy didn't answer, but his eyes blinked rapidly. Celia waited in silence. 1 minute, 2:5, without rushing. "Mommy, there again," he repeated finally, but there was something different, an inflection, almost a question. "Do you want to go there? See what's there?" For the first time, Matthew turned his face towards her. The eye contact lasted only an instant, but it was enough. Celia extended her hand without touching the boy, just offering, "Shall we go together?" To her surprise, Matthew accepted the invitation. They went down the side stairs that led directly to the garden, avoiding the commotion of the house. The lawn was overgrown, the garden abandoned since Clarice's departure 4 years prior. Only the essentials were maintained by gardeners who came fortnightly. Following the direction the boy always pointed, Celia realized they would need to go around old flower beds and a small labyrinth of shrubs that grew unchecked. Matthew walked decisively now, still holding her hand, guiding her along a path he seemed to know by heart, despite never having been there, as far as Celia knew. Behind a small disused fountain, hidden by climbing plants and almost swallowed by vegetation, appeared the object of the boy's entire fixation. An old swing with faded blue metal and frayed ropes, tied to a thick branch of a jackfruit tree. Matthew let go of Celia's hand and ran to the swing. He sat down slowly, like someone performing a sacred ritual. He closed his eyes and whispered, so softly she almost didn't hear, "Mommy." A shiver ran down Celia's spine. It was no longer Mommy there again, but simply Mommy, a call, a recognition. The boy was swinging gently now, his face peaceful as she had never seen before, as if he had finally come home. When they returned to the mansion an hour later, Matthew was different. His steps were lighter, his shoulders less tense. In his room, he didn't immediately return to the window, but picked up an abandoned sketchpad and began to scribble blue circles, one after another. Mrs. Celeste found Celia in the kitchen, preparing a snack for the boy. How did he behave? Did he have a tantrum? Celia sliced apples thinly, exactly as Matthew preferred. "We were fine. We went for a walk in the garden." "In the garden? But he never wants to go to the garden. The therapists have been trying for years." Celia merely smiled, keeping what she had discovered to herself. That night, after everyone had retired, she returned alone to the swing's location. She cleared dry leaves, checked the metal structure which, despite superficial rust, seemed solid. The ropes would need to be replaced, but the wooden seat was intact. Under the dim light of her phone's flashlight, she found something engraved on the wooden seat. The initials CM inside a heart. Clarice Morrison. The swing had been hers. A special place now forgotten by everyone, except for a boy who, in some mysterious way, knew exactly where to look. Celia kept that information like one guards a precious seed, knowing she would need the right moment to plant it. The next day, when she brought Matthew his breakfast, the boy was not at the window. She found him sitting on the bed, holding an old photograph he had taken from a drawer. A young, beautiful woman with curly hair and a luminous smile, sitting on the blue swing. "Mommy," he said simply, handing the photo to Celia. At that moment, she understood that there was much more to that repetitive gesture than any report or specialist had ever captured. It wasn't a symptom, it was a message, and she would be the first to truly listen. Over the following weeks, Celia established a secret routine with Matthew. Every day after lunch, when Bernard was immersed in video conferences and Mrs. Celeste took her brief rest, she took the boy to the swing. Initially, the visits lasted only a few minutes, just enough time for Matthew to sit, swing gently, and reconnect with something only he seemed to understand. With Mrs. Celeste's veiled permission, who had noticed the improvement in the boy's behavior, Celia began to transform that forgotten corner. She removed weeds, trimmed shrubs, replaced the rotten ropes with new sturdy ones, and carefully sanded the rusted metal. She avoided painting the swing, preserving the faded blue color that seemed so important to Matthew. "You're making trouble." "Ma'am," warned the house's driver, Mr. Juvenile, when he found her carrying bags of garden materials. "That place has been closed since the mistress left. The boss won't like it." "The boss barely knows his son exists," Celia replied without aggression, merely stating a fact. "And the boy needs that place." On a particularly hot afternoon in February, while Matthew was swinging with his eyes closed, something unexpected happened. A movement in the nearby bushes made Celia alert. Instinctively, she placed herself between the vegetation and the boy, fearing an animal. What emerged, however, was much more surprising. A girl, apparently the same age as Matthew, watched them with a wild, suspicious gaze. She wore tattered clothes, a faded dress too big for her thin body, and worn sneakers without laces. Her dark curly hair was tangled, and her brown skin, though dirty, revealed delicate features. Celia was paralyzed, fearing that any movement would scare away the small intruder. Matthew, however, opened his eyes, and upon seeing the girl, did something unprecedented. He smiled. A full, luminous smile that Celia had never witnessed before. "Hi," he said, the first spontaneous word Celia had heard him utter, besides the repetitive "mommy." The girl didn't respond, but took a hesitant step towards them. Her eyes, Celia noticed with a start, were identical to Matthew's, perfect almond shapes of a peculiar greenish-brown. The same face shape, the same slightly pointed chin, even the way she tilted her head slightly to the left when curious. "Want to swing?" Matthew continued, getting up from the swing and offering it to the unexpected visitor. To Celia's astonishment, the girl accepted the invitation. She approached like a skittish animal, always ready to flee, but sat on the swing. Matthew, with an unprecedented ease, positioned himself behind her and began to push gently. Soon the crystalline sound of children's laughter, two distinct but strangely harmonious laughs, filled the afternoon air. For almost an hour, the children took turns on the swing, creating their own communication made more of gestures than words. Matthew, who normally avoided physical contact, allowed the girl to hold his hand. She, in turn, mimicked his movements with perfect synchronicity, as if they knew a secret dance. When Celia finally offered water and a plate of fruits she had brought for a snack, the girl accepted with controlled voracity. She ate each piece methodically, exactly as Matthew did. She took small sips, rested the glass, waited for exactly 3 seconds, and drank again. An identical pattern, a behavioral mirror. "What's your name?" Celia asked, maintaining a respectful distance. The girl looked at the ground, then at Matthew, as if seeking permission. "Little sister," Matthew said suddenly, pointing to the visitor. The word made Celia's heart jump. It wasn't just a term of endearment. There was recognition there, a truth that began to form in her mind. Still hazy but insistent. The girl smiled upon hearing the nickname, but when Celia tried to invite her to see the house, she recoiled. With surprising agility, she climbed the ivy-covered fence and disappeared among the trees that separated the Morrison property from an adjacent municipal park. "Will she come back?" Matthew asked, seeming worried for the first time. "I think so," Celia replied, as surprised by the question as by the afternoon's events. "I think she liked it here." And the girl returned the next day at exactly the same time, and the next, always at the moment. Matthew settled on the swing as if she had a perfectly synchronized internal clock. Never before, never after. Celia began to document everything. She bought a notebook, where she meticulously noted times, behaviors, reactions. She left more substantial snacks, sandwiches, cakes, water bottles. She noticed that the girl hid some of the food in improvised pockets of her dress, probably for later. Discreetly, she began to photograph the encounters with her old cell phone. Each image confirmed what her eyes captured. The resemblance between the children was striking. Not just physical, but in mannerisms, preferences, even the way they wrinkled their noses when smiling. Celia kept the photos in a password-protected folder, awaiting the right moment to share them. On a rainy afternoon when they couldn't go to the garden, Matthew became restless. For the first time in weeks, he returned to the window, pointing insistently. Celia improvised a shelter with a large umbrella and took him to the swing. To her surprise, the girl was there, soaked, trembling with cold but waiting. There was something desperate in her eyes that day. "You didn't come," she accused, speaking for the first time. Her voice was hoarse from disuse but melodious. "It was raining," Celia explained, wrapping her in a towel she had brought. "I didn't think you'd come in this weather." The girl accepted the towel but refused to enter the house, even as the rain intensified. "I promised to come." "I always keep my promises." Matthew sat beside her under the small cover the tree canopy offered. Without words, he took off his jacket and placed it over the visitor's shoulders. The gesture, so atypical for a child with his communication and interaction difficulties, reinforced what Celia already suspected. There was a special connection there, something that transcended conventional explanations. That night, while helping to put away the dinner dishes, Celia watched Bernard cross the kitchen in search of his usual coffee. He looked particularly tired, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a weary expression. "The boy has improved," she commented, testing the waters. He's more communicative. Bernard took the cup she offered, surprised by the observation. Employees rarely spoke to him about personal matters. The therapist's report mentioned something like that, he admitted, embarrassed not to have noticed personally. He goes to the garden every day now. He has a special place there. A shadow crossed the businessman's face. What place? An old swing behind the bushes. The one he always pointed to from the window. The cup trembled in Bernard's hand, spilling coffee on the marble counter. That swing still exists? His voice sounded choked, as if something obstructed his throat. It does, and it seems very important to him. Celia wiped up the spilled coffee, giving the man time to process the information. It has your wife's initials carved into the wood. Bernard leaned against the counter, suddenly pale. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he reopened them, there was something different there. A crack in the armor he had maintained for years. Clarice loved that swing. She was pregnant when she asked for it to be installed. She said it would be the perfect place for the children. He hesitated on the last word, as if it brought physical pain. Celia saw the opportunity. Carefully, she took her phone from her apron pocket and showed one of the photos she had taken that afternoon. Matthew and the girl sitting side by side on the swing, identical curly hair, same profile against the sunlight. Bernard's reaction was immediate and visceral. He staggered backward, knocking over the cup which shattered on the floor. His eyes fixed on the image, wide with shock and recognition. Who is this girl? I don't know her name yet. She appeared in the garden 2 weeks ago. She comes every day to meet Matthew at the swing. They have an instant connection, as if they already knew each other. Celia paused, gathering courage. Mr. Bernard, they are identical. The same eyes, the same face, even the same gestures. Bernard took the phone with trembling hands, zooming in on the image. He touched the girl's face on the screen with hesitant fingers. On the day Clarice, he stopped, unable to utter the word. At the hospital, everything was so chaotic. They said the baby, the girl, hadn't made it. I never saw the body. I never got to say goodbye. His voice faltered. There was so much confusion, lost documents, different doctors coming and going. I was devastated, barely functional. Celia remained silent, just listening, giving space for the memories to emerge. Later, with Matthew's diagnosis, with everything that happened, I never questioned it. I accepted what they told me. He looked at the photo again, as if he couldn't tear his eyes away. But what if there was a mistake? Or something worse? The question hung in the kitchen air, heavy with possibilities. Outside the mansion walls, night fell over London, covering ancient secrets and imminent revelations with its dark mantle. Upstairs, Matthew slept peacefully for the first time in years, dreaming of blue swings and a playmate who, in some mysterious way, had always been in his heart, even before he met her. The conversation in the kitchen marked a turning point. That same night, Bernard did not return to the office as usual. He climbed the stairs slowly and, for the first time in years, entered Matthew's room while the boy slept. He stood there motionless in the dim light, observing the son he barely knew. The chest rose and fell with tranquil breathing, the face relaxed in deep sleep. Bernard noticed details he had long ignored. The long eyelashes like Clarice's, the small hands that even in sleep held a small, worn teddy bear tightly, a gift from the mother he never got to know. Returning to his own room, Bernard opened a box he had kept closed for 4 years, stored at the back of his closet. There were Clarice's personal belongings that he hadn't had the courage to donate or discard. Jewelry, diaries, the last book she had been reading, marked on page 183. At the bottom of the box, brown envelopes with the medical documentation of Matthew's birth and the supposed passing of his sister. Bernard's hands trembled as he spread the documents on the king-size bed he now occupied alone. Birth and death certificates, incomplete medical records, authorization forms signed in a state of shock. Things that at the time appeared as ink blurs before his eyes, devastated by Clarice's loss. Now, with a renewed gaze, he noticed inconsistencies, different signatures on sequential documents, times that didn't match, a baby's medical record with abruptly interrupted notes, and, most intriguingly, the absence of his daughter's death certificate, only a provisional declaration, signed by a doctor whose name was not on the main team, Dr. Edward Taylor. Sleep did not come that night. When the first rays of sun began to penetrate through the blinds, Bernard had already made a decision. At breakfast, he requested Celia's presence. "I need to see this girl today." Celia nodded, understanding the urgency. "She always comes at the same time after lunch. But we can't scare her. She's very skittish, suspicious of adults. She only trusts Matthew. I won't approach her. I just need to see her better, confirm with my own eyes." At 2 in the afternoon, Bernard watched from a distance, hidden behind an old, disused greenhouse. Matthew and Celia were already at the swing when the little visitor appeared. Cautious as always, but with a smile reserved exclusively for her playmate. The impact was physical. Bernard felt the air escape his lungs. It was like seeing Clarice in miniature, with features he recognized from his own face mixed with those of his lost wife. The same rebellious curls Matthew displayed before Mrs. Celeste insisted on keeping them shorter. The same way of walking, slightly leaning forward, as if always in a hurry to get somewhere. Even more revealing was the moment when the girl, sitting next to Matthew on the double swing Celia had improvised, looked directly in the direction where Bernard was hiding. Even from a distance he recognized the look. It was Clarice's gaze, intense, scrutinizing as if she could see through people. That afternoon, Bernard made 3 decisive calls. The first, to cancel all his appointments for the week. The second, to Andrew Meadows, his personal lawyer and college friend. The third, to Richard Fountains, a former police officer, who now worked as a private investigator, known for his discretion and efficiency. The meeting took place in the mansion's office, away from curious eyes. Andrew, always formal in his well-cut suit, and Richard, with the alert posture of someone who had spent years observing suspicious behaviors, listened attentively as Bernard shared his suspicions and showed the photos Celia had taken. "Legally, if she is your daughter, we have a serious case of falsification of public documents, medical negligence, possibly even child abduction," Andrew explained, adjusting his thin-framed glasses. "But we need concrete evidence before any official move." Richard examined the hospital documents with trained eyes. "This doctor, Edward Taylor, does not appear on any other document besides the provisional death declaration. I will verify if he actually existed, if he had a license with the medical council. We also need to access the hospital's internal records, on-call schedules for that night, security cameras if they still exist." "And the girl?" Bernard asked. "How do we find out who she is, where she came from?" "A cautious approach," Richard advised. "If she is homeless, there might be an informal protection system around her. Other children, adults who know her. I'll do some discreet work in the adjacent park, see if I can get information without raising suspicion." Celia, who had been invited to the meeting, added, "She seems to spend the night somewhere in the park. Sometimes she brings wild flowers that only grow in the densest part of the woods. And she's always hungry, but she eats politely, as if someone taught her good manners." The following days were filled with intense, though silent, activity. While Celia maintained the routine of the swing meetings, documenting each interaction, Richard set up a discreet observation post in the park, disguised as a nature photographer. Andrew delved into the records of St. Christopher's Hospital, where the twins had been born. The first discoveries came as loose pieces of a disturbing puzzle. Dr. Edward Taylor did exist, a resident doctor who resigned 2 days after Matthew's birth, without completing his probationary period. His current whereabouts were unknown. The shift records for that night showed irregularities, names crossed out, last-minute additions, illegible signatures. More disturbingly, the head nurse responsible for the nursery, Martha Oliver, had also left the hospital that same week, without prior notice or documented justification. In the park, Richard identified where the girl likely slept, a small, sheltered clearing with signs of recent occupation, a thin blanket, some improvised toys, carefully folded food wrappers. Talking to regular park-goers, he discovered the girl was known as Nina and had been around for approximately 2 years. Before that, according to an elderly popcorn vendor, she lived with an old woman in a nearby neighborhood, but the woman had suddenly disappeared. At the mansion, something equally significant was happening. Bernard began to change his routine. He started having lunch at home, appearing in Matthew's room outside established hours, trying to build bridges over the abyss of years of distance. The first attempts were clumsy. The businessman didn't know how to interact with his own son, who responded with indifference or agitation. It was Celia who offered guidance unasked. Talk less, listen more. Don't ask direct questions, just be present. And respect his time. Children like Matthew need predictability. Bernard, who used to fire employees for much less than unsolicited advice, surprised everyone by humbly accepting the suggestion. In the mornings, before Matthew woke up, he began to leave small gifts beside the bed. An illustrated book about constellations, a small pocket magnifying glass, a miniature car just like the one he drove himself. Gradually, Matthew began to respond. Not with words initially, but with gestures. A longer gaze when his father entered the room, the silent offer of a puzzle to assemble together. Permission for Bernard to sit beside him during the cartoon he watched religiously at 6 in the evening. On a rainy Wednesday, 2 weeks after the investigation began, Andrew arrived at the mansion with a grave expression. Gathered again in the office, he spread documents on the mahogany table. I gained access to the hospital's internal system through a confidential source. What I found is disturbing. He pointed to a printed computer screen. Look here in the birth registry for that night. There's a double entry with your name and Clarice's, initially registering twins, a boy and a girl, both alive. 6 hours later, there's a correction, indicating only one live birth and one stillbirth. Bernard felt his stomach clench. Who made the correction? Thirsty was insanus. That's the interesting part. The digital signature is Martha Oliver's, the nurse, but the time recorded by the system is 3:42 a.m., a time when, according to the schedule, she shouldn't have been on duty. Richard added, I managed to locate a former cleaning employee who worked at the hospital at that time. She remembers seeing a woman leaving through the service entrance with what appeared to be a baby, accompanied by a man she recognized as a doctor. It happened in the early hours of the morning, an unusual time for hospital discharge. And there's more, Andrew continued. The baby's footprint digital record, a standard procedure in maternity wards, is in the system. But when we requested the physical document, the hospital reported that this specific file was lost during a basement flood 2 years ago. The silence that followed was dense, laden with implications. Finally, Bernard verbalized what everyone was thinking. My daughter didn't die. She was taken. Celia, who had listened in silence until then, added a crucial piece of information. The girl told Matthew something yesterday. He told me in his own fragmented way something about a grandma who went to heaven. She said that after that, she lived in many different places until she found the swing tree. Bernard stood up, determination burning in his eyes. We need definitive proof. A DNA test. It will be complicated, Richard warned. The girl distrusts strangers, especially adult men, and we can't just take her to a lab. It was Matthew who indirectly offered the solution. That night, while Bernard tried to build a dialogue with his son during dinner, the boy surprised everyone with a clear sentence. Nina is my little sister. Like me. Bernard almost dropped his fork. You know her name, Nina? Matthew nodded affirmatively, focused on methodically cutting his chicken into perfectly equal pieces. She told me. It's not a real name. It's because she doesn't have a name. What do you mean she doesn't have a name? Bernard asked, keeping his voice calm despite growing anxiety. Grandma called her girl. Jenna, it became Nina. Matthew continued looking at his plate, but his words were surprisingly articulate. She doesn't have papers. She can't go to school like me. She can't go to the doctor. The simplicity of the observation contained a devastating truth. If the girl had indeed been illegally removed from the hospital, she probably had no official documentation. No birth certificate, no medical history, no school enrollment. A child invisible to the system. That night marked a turning point for Bernard. After putting Matthew to bed, another newly discovered ritual, he sought Celia in the kitchen where she was preparing bread for the next day. We need to win her trust. Not just for the DNA test, but to bring her home if she really is my daughter. It will take time, Celia replied, kneading the dough with precise movements. Trust isn't built overnight, especially with children who have experienced abandonment. We don't have much time. If she's on the streets, she faces dangers every day. Celia stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Bernard. With all due respect, sir, she has survived until now, and we are talking about a child who, if she is your daughter, was already taken from her family once. An abrupt approach could traumatize her further. The frankness bothered Bernard, but he recognized the truth in her words. "What do you suggest, then?" "Continue with the investigation. Gather all possible evidence, but with Nina we will follow her pace. Build security through routine, show her she can trust us. Matthew is the key. She already trusts him instinctively." The next day, under Celia's guidance, Bernard discreetly observed another meeting between the children. This time, Nina brought a small gift for Matthew, a rose quartz crystal she had found in the park. The simplicity of the gesture, the way Matthew received the gift with unusual reverence, deeply touched Bernard. Through the lenses of the camera, Richard had strategically installed they captured clear images, the same unconscious gestures when focused, the same way of frowning when thoughtful, even the same pattern when chewing the sandwiches Celia prepared, always starting from the edges, working methodically towards the center. "I don't need DNA to know," Bernard murmured, observing the images on the laptop screen that night. "But we will get it, so no one can ever question it." The strategy for the DNA test was carefully elaborated. A discreet private clinic, specializing in paternity tests, agreed to receive them outside normal hours through a side entrance without the need for formal identification. The procedure would be simple and painless, just a swab from the inside of the cheek. The greater challenge remained, convincing Nina. The approach for the DNA test required delicacy. At Celia's suggestion, they decided to be completely honest with Nina, to the extent she could understand. For 3 consecutive days, Matthew practiced what he would say, with Celia patiently guiding him, adjusting the words to be simple and direct. On Wednesday, when Nina appeared for their usual meeting, Matthew was visibly nervous. They sat together on the refurbished swing, ate the snacks prepared by Celia, and when the moment seemed right, the boy held his companion's hand. "Nina, you are my real little sister," he said, looking at the ground as was his custom when anxious. "Daddy wants to do a test. It doesn't hurt. It's just passing a stick here." He pointed to his own cheek. "Then the doctor will say if we're really siblings." Nina remained still, processing the information. Her eyes, always alert, moved from Matthew to Celia, who maintained a respectful distance. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice small but firm. It was Celia who answered, approaching slowly. "To be sure, dear. If you are Matthew's sister, it means Mr. Bernard is your father. It means you have a family, a home." Nina's face hardened with suspicion. "Men lie," Grandma always said. "Not all of them," Celia replied softly. "Matthew's father didn't know you existed. He thought you had gone away when you were born. Now he wants to be sure so he can take care of you, like he takes care of Matthew." Nina looked at the boy, who still held her hand tightly. "Will you come with me?" "I will," Matthew assured her. "I'll do the test too. It's quick." Still hesitant, Nina asked another question. "If the test says I'm little sister, what happens?" "You can stay here if you want," Celia replied. "Have a room, new clothes, go to school like Matthew. Can I still come to the swing?" "Every day." "What if I don't want to stay inside the house?" "No one will force you to do anything. We'll go at your pace." Nina remained silent for long minutes, contemplating the swing, the surrounding trees, the path to the park that had been her refuge for so long. Finally, she squeezed Matthew's hand. "Okay, but only if Matthew comes too." The collection happened the next day. Bernard drove personally, with Matthew and Nina in the back seat, accompanied by Celia. The girl remained tense throughout the journey, but her brother's presence seemed to calm her. She watched the city through the car window with contained fascination, as if seeing everything for the first time. At the clinic, everything went as planned. The doctor, previously instructed, was gentle and direct. He explained each step before performing it, first demonstrating on himself how the swab worked. Matthew went first, encouraging Nina with his example. When it was her turn, she hesitated only for an instant before opening her mouth, eyes fixed on Matthew throughout the procedure. Bernard was last. As the doctor collected his sample, he watched the 2 children through the glass door of the waiting room. They sat side by side, identical in posture and gestures, sharing an illustrated book Celia had brought. The image provoked a wave of emotion he could barely contain, a mixture of joy for what he had found and deep pain for the lost years. "The results will be ready in 6 business days," the doctor informed them, storing the samples in coded containers. "Given the Delicacy of the situation. I suggest you maintain absolute discretion until we have confirmation. Back at the mansion, Nina accepted the invitation for the first time to explore the garden beyond the swing area. Still wary of enclosed spaces, she agreed to explore the shrub labyrinth, the disused fountain and the small orchard at the far end of the property. Matthew, surprisingly, took on the role of guide, showing his favorite spots with unusual enthusiasm for his usually reserved temperament. In the days that followed, while awaiting the results, Bernard delved deeper into the investigation. Richard managed to locate Martha Oliver, the former head nurse now living in a small coastal town hundreds of miles from London. After multiple attempts at contact, she finally agreed to a phone conversation on condition of anonymity. "I knew this would come out one day," were her first words, laden with guilt and relief. "I always knew it was wrong, but at the time," there were threats, pressure. Dr. Edward had powerful connections. The confession, recorded with authorization, revealed the scheme. A group within the hospital, led by Dr. Edward Taylor, falsified documents to declare healthy babies stillborn, delivering them to a network that passed them on for irregular adoption or, in some cases, to people who raised them as their own children. In Nina's case, according to Martha, the baby had been given to a woman who paid a substantial sum, but her fate after that, she didn't know. "It was in the confusion after the complication with your wife," she explained, addressing Bernard. "You were devastated, focused on her. You didn't see when they took the baby. You signed papers without reading, trusting the doctors. They took advantage of that." The revelation brought a mixture of horror and confirmation. Andrew, who was on the call, immediately began working on the necessary legal procedures, while Richard expanded the investigation to map the entire network involved. At the mansion, a silent transformation was taking place. Nina, though still refusing to sleep inside the house, had accepted a comfortable tent set up near the swing, with a soft mattress, blankets, and a small lantern. Celia left full meals not only for daily meetings, but also for the night and breakfast. More significant was the effect of Nina's presence on Matthew. The boy, previously isolated in his inner world, showed remarkable progress. He spoke more, smiled frequently, and his sensory overload crises had considerably diminished. Mrs. Celeste, initially skeptical about the whole situation, was won over when she witnessed Matthew reciting the planets of the solar system in order, something the therapists had been trying to teach him for months without success. Nina, they discovered, had a fascination with astronomy, learned from a worn book she kept among her few belongings. "She's good for him," the governess admitted to Celia, watching the children play in the garden. "I've never seen him so connected to the world." On Friday, 5 days after the DNA collection, an unexpected phone call changed everything. The laboratory had processed the samples with priority, and the results were ready. The responsible scientist, realizing the importance of the case, chose to call personally. "Mr. Morrison, the results are conclusive. The probability of paternity is over 99.9998%, and the genetic profile of the two children confirms they are dizygotic twins." Bernard, alone in his office, dropped the phone. The tears he had held back for so long finally came, uncontrollable. He cried for his lost wife, for the stolen years, for the daughter who had grown up without his knowledge or protection, for the son he had kept at a distance for fear of his own pain. When he composed himself, his first action was to seek Andrew. "I want the most discreet process possible. No media, no public scandals yet. First, we need to ensure Nina's safety and adaptation." The lawyer agreed. "We can start the document rectification process immediately. With the DNA test and the nurse's confession, we have a solid basis. In parallel, the authorities will need to be notified about the hospital scheme, but we can request judicial secrecy initially. The most delicate part would come next, telling Nina the truth." Bernard sought guidance from Dr. Helen Vance, Matthew's psychologist, who recommended absolute honesty, adapted to the girl's age and understanding, in a safe environment and with immediate support available. The chosen location could not be other, the Blue Swing. On Saturday morning, with the sun filtering through the jackfruit leaves, Nina found not only Matthew and Celia, but also Bernard, sitting discreetly on a nearby wooden bench. Celia began the conversation. "Nina, remember the test we did? To find out if you and Matthew are siblings? The girl nodded, swinging gently, her eyes attentive. The result is in. You are siblings, yes, twins. You were born together from the same mother whose name was Clarice. Nina stopped swinging, absorbing the information. So, he's my father. She pointed to Bernard, who remained motionless, respecting her space. Yes, Celia confirmed. He didn't know you existed. Bad people at the hospital said you had gone to heaven when you were born. They took you away without him knowing. To Grandma, Nina completed, connecting the pieces in her child's mind. Probably, Celia agreed. And when Grandma went away, you were alone. Nina shook her head, thoughtful. She looked at Matthew, then at Bernard, assessing the situation with surprising maturity for her 8 years. Can I meet my mother? The question, so simple and devastating, made everyone's heart ache. It was Bernard who answered in a soft voice. Your mother was the most wonderful person I ever knew, Nina. She had eyes like yours and the same curly hair. He paused, controlling his emotion. She's not here anymore. She had a problem when you were born and went to heaven. But she loved you both more than anything, even before she met you. She was the one who asked for this swing to be made here, for you to play together. But we didn't play together, Nina observed, with the direct logic of children. No, Bernard admitted, because bad people separated you. It's something I can't fix, I can't go back. But now you're here, and if you want, this is your home too. Your place has always been here with your brother. Matthew, who had been observing in silence, got off the swing and extended his hand to Nina. Stay, little sister, please. Nina looked at the outstretched hand, at Celia, at Bernard, and finally at the large, imposing house that seemed so distant from her reality. Can I have a room near Matthew? And come to the swing whenever I want. Of course, Bernard replied, fighting the urge to hug her. You can choose any room you prefer. Decorate it however you like. And the swing is yours, it always has been. Nina's answer did not come in words. Slowly, still holding Matthew's hand, she took a few hesitant steps towards Bernard. She stopped at a safe distance, studying him with the analytical gaze she had inherited from Clarice. Grandma said my father was an important man who didn't want me. Did she lie? Bernard swallowed hard, devastated by the cruelty of that lie. Yes, she lied. I didn't know about you, Nina. If I had, I would have turned the whole world upside down to find you. The girl absorbed the answer, processing it in silence. Then, in a gesture no one expected, she extended her free hand, the one not holding Matthew's, towards Bernard. Is my name Nina? Bernard hesitated, emotional. Your mother wanted to call you Amanda. Amanda Clarice, like her grandmother. But you can choose what you want to be called. The girl pondered for a moment. Amanda is pretty, but everyone calls me Nina. How about Amanda Nina, or Nina Amanda? A small smile appeared on the girl's face, the first directed at Bernard. Nina Amanda. I like it. That afternoon, Nina Amanda Morrison entered the mansion for the first time as a daughter, not a visitor. Matthew guided her through the corridors, showing each room with growing pride. When they reached the second floor, Nina chose a room with a window overlooking the garden, from where she could see the blue swing. I want blue walls too, she declared, like the sky. Bernard, who followed them at a respectful distance, made mental notes of everything, her preferred colors, small gestures of comfort or discomfort, reactions to different spaces. He realized with a mixture of admiration and sadness how his daughter was simultaneously fragile and strong, shaped by a life of challenges no child should face. That night, Nina still preferred to sleep in her tent in the garden, but accepted a warm bath, clean clothes Celia had hastily provided, and a full dinner at the table with Matthew and Bernard. When Bernard went to check on her before retiring, he found her wrapped in soft blankets, looking at the stars through the tent's opening. Everything all right in there? He asked, staying at a comfortable distance. Nina nodded. The stars are the same from before. When I lived in the park, they kept me company. Bernard felt his heart ache. Now you're not alone anymore, Nina. You never will be. The girl didn't answer, but her gaze contained a silent question that Bernard understood perfectly. How can I be sure? Tomorrow, he promised, we will start building our story together. One day at a time. And I will prove every day that this is your home and that you belong here. You always have. In the following week, legal proceedings advanced with surprising speed, driven by Bernard's influence and irrefutable evidence. Nina Amanda Morrison officially came into existence in the records with a rectified birth certificate, identity documents, and all the necessary formalities to guarantee her rights. In parallel, a discreet investigation began to unravel the extent of the network operating in St. Christopher's Hospital. It was discovered that Nina was not the only victim. At least 12 other similar cases were identified, some involving babies declared stillborn, others as deceased due to postpartum complications. Nina's adaptation to her new life happened in small steps. Her room, painted sky blue, frequently remained empty at night. She still preferred to sleep outdoors, though the tent was gradually replaced by a treehouse Bernard had built near the swing, equipped with all necessary comforts. During the day, however, Nina explored her new reality more and more. She accepted a home visit from a pediatrician who found her surprisingly healthy, despite years of precarious living. She agreed to talk with Dr. Helen, the psychologist, initially only in joint sessions with Matthew, then individually. The sessions revealed a rich and complex inner world. Nina had developed sophisticated survival strategies, blended with remarkable natural intelligence and acute sensitivity. Like Matthew, she exhibited some behaviors that suggested neuroatypicality, hyperfocus on specific subjects, heightened sensory sensitivity, difficulty with certain social interactions, but expressed differently, adapted to her life circumstances. She protected herself in the only way she could, Dr. Helen explained to Bernard, by creating an ordered inner world to compensate for the external chaos. It's extraordinary, really, how she remained whole in the face of so much abandonment. For Matthew, his sister's presence represented a revolution. His communicative abilities flourished. His interest in the world expanded. Nina intuitively seemed to understand his needs. When he needed silence, when he was sensually overloaded, when he wished to share but couldn't find words. 6 months transformed the Morrison mansion. Vibrant colors replaced the sober tones on the walls, laughter echoed through the previously silent corridors, and the garden, completely revitalized, became the pulsating heart of the property. The blue swing, now masterfully restored, metal sanded and repainted in the same original color, new sturdy ropes treated wooden seat preserving Clarice's initials, swung daily, carrying not just 2 children, but a whole story of loss and reunion. Nina finally accepted sleeping indoors, but only after Bernard transformed her room into a kind of observatory, a ceiling painted like a night sky, with constellations that glowed in the dark, an entire glass wall facing the garden, with light curtains that could be completely opened on starry nights, and a small side door that gave direct access to an external staircase, allowing her to go out to the garden whenever she felt the need. School adaptation began cautiously. Matthew attended a specialized institution for neurodiverse children, with a sensitive and individualized approach. Nina, after careful evaluations, showed surprising knowledge in astronomy and natural sciences, mixed with significant gaps in formal literacy and structured mathematics. The solution found was a hybrid program, some subjects taken at the same school as Matthew, others with personalized tutoring at home. "She absorbs knowledge like a sponge," commented the science tutor, Professor Deborah, after a month of work. "She has an impressive empirical knowledge of plants, natural cycles, animal behavior. She learned by observing the world without anyone formally teaching her." The most significant transformation, however, occurred in Bernard. The businessman who once lived in his office now delegated responsibilities, refused long trips, and reorganized his schedule to be present for crucial moments: daily family dinners, joint therapy sessions, school presentations. He learned to identify when Matthew needed sensory space and when Nina was about to feel overwhelmed by enclosed environments. Celia remained a fundamental pillar of the new family dynamic. From kitchen assistant, she was promoted to house coordinator and personal assistant to the twins, a title she herself considered exaggerated, but accepted with contained pride. "Never underestimate the power of patient observation," became her mantra, When training the new team hired by Bernard, professionals carefully selected not only for their qualifications, but for their sensitivity in dealing with the children's particularities. The investigation into the hospital scheme advanced discreetly, protected by judicial secrecy at Bernard's request, who prioritized his children's emotional well-being over public exposure. Dr. Edward Taylor was finally located in Ireland, living under a false identity. Extradited and preventively arrested, he confessed the existence of an organized network that had operated for almost a decade in various hospitals in the southeast region. The confession opened doors for similar reunifications. Other families who had lost babies under suspicious circumstances could finally discover the truth and, in some cases, reunite with their children. For Bernard, each new family reunited brought a mixture of joy for others and renewed pain for the irretrievable years. "I can't stop thinking about the lost birthdays, the first steps I didn't see, the first words I didn't hear," he confessed to Dr. Helen during a parental guidance session. "Especially with Nina. At least with Matthew, even from a distance, I was nearby." "The past cannot be changed," the psychologist replied gently. "But you have the present and the future, and you are building something extraordinary now." That future took concrete form when Bernard announced one dinner evening his newest project, the Clarice Morrison Foundation, dedicated to two intertwined causes: support for neurodiverse children and protection for vulnerable children. "Mommy would like it," Matthew observed, surprising everyone with his perception. Nina, who was rapidly developing vocabulary and verbal expression, completed, "She's watching." From the stars. The Foundation's headquarters were established in a restored historic mansion near the park where Nina had lived. The space was designed to be completely accessible and sensorially friendly. Sensory decompression areas, therapeutic gardens, art and music studios, and a training center for specialized caregivers, therapists, and educators. The choice of location was no coincidence. Nina insisted on actively participating in the project, emphasizing the preservation of specific trees and the creation of spaces that replicated the refugees that had protected her during her years of survival. "I want other children like me to have a chance," she explained to Bernard. With the wisdom her 8 years of hard life had given her, many are still out there alone. The foundation soon became a reference, combining scientific research, direct assistance, and advocacy for public policies. Bernard, using his business contacts, secured sustainable funding through partnerships with large corporations and investors interested in social impact. Beyond the institutional aspects, the foundation provided something unexpected, a channel for personal transformation for Bernard. The businessman who once took refuge in numbers and contracts now spoke openly about unprocessed grief, neurodiverse parenthood, and the importance of efficient child protection systems. At a fundraising event, he surprised everyone with a speech that completely diverged from his old style. "My son spent years pointing to a truth no one wanted to see." A repetitive gesture, classified as a symptom, contained the greatest mystery and the greatest treasure of our family. It took someone who observed patiently, who asked why instead of correcting, for that truth to emerge. What I learned and share with you today is that often the answers we seek are right in front of us, expressed in ways we don't understand because we don't truly stop to listen. The Morrison twins case, as it became known in the restricted circles that had access to the full story, inspired changes in protocols for public and private maternity hospitals, more rigorous documentation, improved identification systems, greater transparency in birth and death registration processes for the children. However, life continued with more immediate and everyday concerns. Matthew progressed remarkably at school, developing specific interests in mathematics and music. Nina, though still struggling with formal literacy, revealed extraordinary talents in visual arts and natural sciences. Both maintained their peculiarities. Matthew still needed a structured routine and moments of isolation to regulate his sensory experience. Nina still occasionally needed nights outdoors to feel safe, especially after emotionally intense days or during storms that made her relive memories of vulnerability. Bernard learned to navigate these waters with increasing patience, guided by Celia, who seemed to have a sixth sense for the children's non-verbalized needs, and by Dr. Helen, who translated behaviors into understanding and practical strategies. The relationship between Bernard and Celia, in turn, subtly transformed over that year. What began as an employer-employee hierarchy evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Conversations about the children extended to discussions about life, loss, new beginnings. Dinners after the twins had gone to bed became moments of decompression where both could simply be human, without titles or expectations. On one of those nights, sitting on the veranda overlooking the garden lit by discreet solar lights, Bernard made a confession. "I never properly thanked you. You not only found my daughter, you helped me find my son again too, and in a way myself." Celia, never comfortable with compliments, averted her gaze to the blue swing that moved gently in the night breeze. "I just saw what was in front of everyone. Anyone would have noticed eventually." "But they didn't. I didn't notice, and I'm their father." "You were immersed in your own pain," she replied softly. "It's hard to look outward when you're drowning inside." The mutual understanding that night opened space for a gradual closeness, not just professional or friendly, but something more complex and promising. Bernard, who since Clarice's passing had maintained brief and superficial relationships, found himself attracted not by conventional beauty, but by Celia's serene strength and keen perception. She, in turn, remained cautious, not due to insecurity about her feelings, but out of awareness of the delicate dynamic involving the children and the house she now also considered her own. It was Nina, with her sharp perception, who verbalized what everyone silently perceived. One Sunday afternoon, as the four returned from a picnic in the municipal park, a program that had become a weekly tradition, the girl observed, "Celia likes Daddy. Daddy likes Celia. Why don't they talk about it?" The car suddenly went silent. Matthew, in the back seat beside his sister, looked up from his book, suddenly interested in the social dynamic he usually ignored. "It's complicated." "Nina," Bernard finally replied, looking briefly at Celia beside him in the passenger seat. "Why? You're sad she makes you happy. She likes us, we like her. Seems simple." The child's logic, stripped of social layers and expectations, exposed the truth in its most elemental form. Celia, usually composed, found herself blushing like a teenager. "Sometimes adults take longer to notice obvious things," she replied, looking out the window to hide the smile that insisted on forming. That casual conversation in the car served as a catalyst. In the following weeks, Bernard and Celia began to carefully explore the possibilities of that emerging feeling, always with the children as the absolute priority, always with transparency and mutual respect. As the first anniversary of the family's reunification approached, Bernard planned a special celebration. On the exact day Nina was found on the blue swing a year prior, family and close friends gathered in the mansion's garden for an event that was simultaneously a party and a ritual of gratitude. The garden, completely transformed, now housed not only the historic swing, but an entire sensorially friendly recreational area, fountains with controllable flow for auditory comfort, varied texture spaces for tactile exploration, carefully planned aromatic flower beds to offer adjustable olfactory experiences, all integrated into nature in an organic and respectful way. At the center of the celebration, the blue swing remained as the ultimate symbol, restored, strengthened, preserving its original essence while adapting to new needs. Bernard had invited key people on that year's journey: Dr. Helen, and the investigator Richard, who continued working on the legal developments of the case, Andrew, the lawyer who had become a close friend, the children's teachers and therapists, and some foundation staff who had dedicated themselves especially to the twins' projects. During the party, Matthew surprised everyone by presenting his own composition on the piano, an instrument he had discovered only 6 months ago and already mastered with extraordinary ease. The piece, simply titled Little Sister, alternated moments of almost abstract mathematical complexity with melodies of poignant sweetness. Nina, in turn, revealed her gift, a mural painted on the side wall of the house, visible from the garden, depicting a curly-haired woman sitting on the blue swing, with 2 small children on her lap and shining stars in the background. The image, executed with impressive technique for her age, captured not a memory, for Nina had never known her mother, but a vision of what could have been, of what in some way still lived through them. When night fell and the children finally fell asleep, Matthew in his carefully organized room, Nina in her bed under the painted starry sky, Bernard and Celia found themselves again on the veranda, contemplating the garden now illuminated only by the soft glow of strategically placed solar lanterns. If someone told me a year ago where we would be today, Bernard reflected, I would have thought it impossible. Celia smiled, watching the swing still moving gently in the night breeze, as if guarding all the secrets and stories that had passed through it. Nothing is truly impossible when you learn to look carefully, she replied. Life is always offering us clues, signs. Matthew knew in some inexplicable way that there was someone waiting for him on that swing. He repeated the message for years until someone finally listened. Bernard took Celia's hand in his, a gesture that now seemed as natural as breathing. You listened, and you taught us to listen too. The next day, in an intimate ceremony organized by Nina herself, the blue swing received a discreet plaque. Here began our reunion. Mommy knew. The words, simple and profound, captured the essence of the entire journey, from loss to recovery, from separation to reunion, from pain to healing. 5 years have passed since then. Matthew and Nina, now 13-year-old teenagers, continued to develop along their own unique paths. Matthew, with his nationally recognized musical talent, prepared for performances at international conservatories, always accompanied by sensory support and adaptations that respected his specific needs. Nina, with her unique perspective on the natural world, excelled in environmental, conservation projects, specializing in the protection of urban green spaces and the creation of accessible areas for neurodiverse children. The Clarice Morrison Foundation had expanded to 5 states in the country, with international pilot projects under development. The legal case resulted in exemplary convictions and, more importantly, in profound revisions of hospital protocols nationwide. Bernard and Celia, now officially a couple, had found balance between personal, family, and professional life. She remained as house coordinator and a maternal figure for the twins, but also took on a fundamental role in the foundation, leading training programs for early identification of special needs and interventions based on qualified observation. On a particular afternoon, as the family gathered for their traditional Sunday picnic, now held alternately in the municipal park and the mansion's garden, Nina made an observation that captured the essence of her entire journey. You know what I find most incredible? That it all started with a misunderstood gesture. Matthew pointing to the garden, repeating the same phrase and everyone thinking it was just meaningless behavior. Matthew, who rarely participated in abstract reflections, surprised everyone by adding, I knew she was there, not as a thought. As a feeling here, he pointed to his own chest, even before I saw her. Bernard, observing his children with a heart overflowing with pride and gratitude, understood the deepest lesson of that extraordinary story. Behind every repetitive behavior, every seemingly meaningless gesture, there can be a truth waiting to be discovered. Behind every marginalized or misunderstood child, there can exist an entire universe of possibilities and connections. The blue swing, now part of a broader set of adapted equipment that made up the mansion's sensory garden, continued as a silent symbol and witness. On summer nights, when the warmth invited the family to the garden, they often found the twins there swinging gently side by side, sometimes in contemplative silence, other times in lively conversations about their projects and dreams. It's funny, Bernard once commented, observing them from a distance, how such a simple object can hold so much meaning. It's not the object itself, Celia replied, intertwining her fingers with his. It's what it represents. The connection that could never truly be broken, even when everything conspired to separate them. On that blue swing, the Morrison family's story continued to be written, page after page, swing after swing, under the same starry sky that had always guided Nina in her solitary nights and now blessed the intertwined paths of them all. Netimai, repetitive gesture of a child, held a devastating secret and a plea for rescue. Patient attention deciphered the code, revealed the truth, reunited siblings, reoriented a father, and transformed a house into a home. The swing remained as proof of that listening, of the echo that finally found an answer after so much silence. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of the Morrison twins has touched your hearts. This journey of connection, loss, and reunion reminds us of the transformative power of true listening and the importance of looking beyond appearances. For more emotional stories like this, we have a special playlist of narratives from this region that explore family bonds and their complexities. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If this story stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. We share daily content that celebrates the strength of the invisible ties that connect us to one another. We count on you in the comments to tell us what touched your hearts most in this story of the Blue Swing.